This is the most unethical sham. This is going to destroy the ability of good people to come forward because of this crap. You had no intention of protecting Dr. Ford. And if you really wanted to know the truth, you sure as hell wouldn't have done what you've done to this guy. Your high school yearbook. Boy, y'all want power. God, I hope you never get it.
All right, we're back with the 6th episode of Genuine Questions. To get back into the timeline of the story, we left off with the incredibly unethical Mueller investigation into the Trump-Russian collusion conspiracy theory. And this episode is going to be about a few major news stories that were going on around the 2018 midterm elections that I felt posed a few genuine questions, not to mention obvious questions, that were just straight up ignored by the media. And I want to talk about a few that stood out to me and tell you why I think they continue to remain relevant today. I ended the last episode with the point that you don't have to listen to Trump or watch Fox News to recognize that the Democratic Party is full of it. You can't self-identify as a woman and then say that you have to believe all women. You can't self-identify into something to make yourself more credible. Those two ideas are mutually exclusive, yet depending on what the Democratic Party needs their talking point to be for that moment, they'll try to tell you both. And this Believe All Women hashtag started with the Brett Kavanaugh hearing. And the reason that they had to say Believe All Women is because there was just absolutely zero evidence that he did this. He felt this woman up over top of her one-piece bathing suit at a party 40 years ago. She didn't have anything to back it up. If there was something to back it up, that would have been the headline, not you gotta believe her because she's a woman. And if you adopt this new self-ID dogma that the Democratic Party is pushing today, womanhood in and of itself is no longer credible. So that means the Democratic Party really had nothing to back up these allegations that Brett Kavanaugh was a rapist, other than some out-of-context quotes from his high school yearbook and a police report that he threw ice at someone during a bar fight in college. This Believe All Women hashtag that he used too also disregards the fact that her friend, who she says was there with her the night this happened, that friend says that never happened. And she is also a woman. So how do I decide which of those two women I'm supposed to believe? But for the sake of argument, let's ignore all of that, and we'll ignore the numerous contradictions in her statements, and we're going to adopt this mindset that we have to believe her because she's a woman and women don't lie. So we're going to listen to a few minutes of her opening statement, and we're going to believe what she says because she's a woman, and she's going to testify that she requested to remain anonymous, but somebody went behind her back and leaked her name to the press.
On July 6th, I had a sense of urgency to relay the information to the Senate and the President as soon as possible before a nominee was selected. I did not know how specifically to do this. I called my congressional representative and let her receptionist know that someone on the President's shortlist had attacked me. I also sent a message to the encrypted Washington Post confidential tip line. I did not use my name, but I provided the names of Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge. I stated that Mr. Kavanaugh had assaulted me in the 1980s in Maryland. This was an extremely hard thing for me to do, but I felt that I couldn't not do it. Over the next 2 days, I told a couple of close friends on the beach in Aptos, California, that Mr. Kavanaugh had sexually assaulted me. I was very conflicted as to whether to speak out. On July 9th, I received a return phone call from the office of Congresswoman Anna Eshoo after Mr. Kavanaugh had become the nominee. I met with her staff on July 18th and with her on July 20th, describing the assault and discussing my fears about coming forward. Later, we discussed the possibility of sending a letter to Ranking Member Feinstein, who is one of my state senators, describing what occurred. My understanding is that Representative Eshoo's office delivered a copy of my letter to Senator Feinstein's office on July 30th. The letter included my name, but also a request that it be kept confidential. My hope was that providing the information confidentially would be sufficient to allow the Senate to consider Mr. Kavanaugh's serious misconduct without having to make myself, my family, or anyone's family vulnerable to the personal attacks and invasions of privacy that we have faced since my name became public. In a letter dated August 31st, Senator Feinstein wrote that she would not share the letter without my explicit consent, and I appreciated this commitment. Sexual assault victims should be able to decide for themselves when and whether their private experience is made public.
I do agree with her on that last sentence, so why wouldn't we want to investigate that? Who leaked her name? The people with the motive are the Democrats who wanted to disrupt this Supreme Court nomination because it would give the other party the majority on the Supreme Court. So they're the ones that had the letter, so they had the means and the opportunity. They would be the obvious suspects. But in interest of fairness, let's listen to their side of the story. But before we do, let's make sure we're on the same page with the timeline of how the story unfolded. And it's reported on right here by Vox. Believe this was September 16th, so this is like the day after her name came out. Says Ford had been in contact with the Post for weeks, but had declined to go public with her allegations. Her calculations changed after news of her letter broke earlier this week. So the letter was leaked before her name was identified. And according to her testimony, she gave this letter to Dianne Feinstein. So in this clip, we're going to get to watch the entirety of Dianne Feinstein's investigation into how Dr. Ford's letter got leaked to the public.
I was given some information by a woman who was very much afraid, who asked that it be held confidential. And I held it confidential until she decided that she would come forward.
Can you tell us that your staff did not leak it?
Oh, I don't believe my staff would leak it. I have not asked that question directly, but I do not believe
you know
they
that?
would.
I mean, how in the world could that get in the hands of the press?
The answer is no. The staff
Have you
said
asked
they did not.
Have you asked your staff or other
I
staff
just
members
did.
on the Judiciary Committee?
They-
Well, somebody leaked it if it wasn't you.
Well, it was, I'm telling you, it was not, I did not. And she testified that she had spoken to her friends about it, and it's most likely that that's how the story leaked, and that she had been asked by press. But it did not leak from us, I assure you of that.
Oh, Mr.
So even if this is the case, that it was her friends at the beach that leaked her letter, is there no journalist that's curious to know why her friends would do that to her? They were curious enough to go back and find this police report that Brett Kavanaugh threw ice at somebody in a college bar fight and get copies of his high school yearbook. But then they don't care to know why her friends would betray her like that for obviously political reasons. I find it astounding that even when you look at this perspective from what the Democratic Party is telling you to look at it from, that you have to believe her because she's a woman, how do you not care to know who betrayed her like that? who put her family in danger and re-victimized her again 40 years later because they wanted to disrupt a Supreme Court nomination. That to me seems like a very interesting and relevant story, and I don't understand your modern, everyday Me Too supporter not asking that question, but Dr. Ford's lack of curiosity on the topic indicates to me that she probably already knows and doesn't really care. So there's another interesting part of the Brett Kavanaugh story that I have a genuine question about. And if you go back to the last episode where we talked about the different witness intimidation tactics that were used against people that had information on the Clintons, the last guy that we talked about was the man Patrick Knowlton. And after that clip that we watched where he was getting harassed by the FBI agents, the next part of his story is he did go to testify in front of the grand jury, saying that he did not see Vince Foster's car in the parking lot at the time his body was supposedly had committed suicide in the park. So his car should have been there because he's dead in the park and killed himself. Patrick Knowlton says his car's not there. When Patrick Knowlton gets to the grand jury to testify, he says that the prosecutor from the Kenneth Starr investigation, so the person who is supposed to be looking into all of this stuff from the skeptical standpoint, investigating the Clintons in the special counsel, that prosecutor only asked him questions like, well, why were you even in the park at that time? Like, were you trying to pick up dudes? Or are you gay? And they never asked him a single question about what car he did or didn't see in the parking lot. And Knowlton's testimony in an interview that he gave is that the prosecutor from the Starr investigation, who did that to him, who didn't ask him a single relevant question, but tried to smear his character, and he's not a trustworthy person because he's gay, the person who did that to him was Brett Kavanaugh. So that makes me wonder, when Brett Kavanaugh says in his opening statement that this entire event, all of these allegations to disrupt his nomination, he says that that was just revenge on behalf of the Clintons. And I want to know, why would the Clintons want revenge on Brett Kavanaugh? He did them a favor. If he would have taken the witness, Patrick Knowlton, seriously and asked him relevant questions to what car he did or did not see in the park that day, there would have been an indictment. Or you would hope that there would be an indictment. There would be enough evidence for one. So by doing what Brett Kavanaugh did, he did the Clintons a solid. So I would love to know why Brett Kavanaugh thinks that the Clintons want revenge on him. Speaking of revenge on behalf of the Clintons, I have this clip that shows the total hypocrisy of Hillary on the Me Too movement. This is Ronan Farrow, the guy who investigated Harvey Weinstein and broke that story. Nobody questions Ronan Farrow's credibility on this stuff. He is being interviewed on Good Morning America by George Stephanopoulos, who is a longtime friend of the Clintons. I forget what job he had in Bill Clinton's administration, but he did something for him. Tight with the Clintons. He's interviewing Ronan Farrow about this book that he wrote where Ronan interviewed every living Secretary of State. And he asks him, what was like the most surprising thing that happened while you were interviewing all of these Secretary of States? And I want you to listen to Ronan Farrow's answer to this question and then see how uncomfortable George Stephanopoulos gets when Ronan Farrow brings this up.
You also spoke with every living Secretary of State. What surprised you most about those conversations?
The honest answer is one of the most surprising beats was how hard it was to get some people on the record. Hillary Clinton had scheduled an interview while it was at the height of the Weinstein reporting, and her folks got in touch and said, we hear you're working on a big story, sounded very concerned, and tried to cancel that interview.
Over the Weinstein stuff?
Over the Weinstein stuff.
Oh, I'm surprised at that. You also write about something that...
Really, George? You're surprised at that? Because I'm not. Sounds exactly like something that she would do. And I love how after the Harvey Weinstein story came out, took her like a week to come up with a statement, and she pretends like she didn't know anything about it at all until it became public, when in fact, sounds like she tried to help him make sure nobody in the public found out about it, because she threatened to cancel an unrelated interview with Ronan Farrow about being Secretary of State unless he dropped the Weinstein story. And as we all know, Ronan didn't take the threat and back down. I believe, in fact, he told Hillary's representative that he'll go ahead and not put her in the book, but in place of where her interview should be, he would just be telling the story about that conversation and why she dropped out. So Hillary gave him a very short, rude interview over the phone just to make sure he didn't talk about that. So that's Hillary Clinton for you. But if you want to look at the wider Democratic Party's hypocrisy on this Me Too, Believe All Women issue, while the Brett Kavanaugh Senate hearing was going on, they extended it for a week after Blasey Ford's allegations came out so they could do another FBI investigation into them. And during the week of that FBI investigation, the Democratic Party's Attorney General in Minnesota, a guy named Keith Ellison, who's pretty high up in the Democratic Party, he is accused of domestic violence against his girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend. And this is what the Democratic Party had to say about her allegations. An allegation standing alone is not necessarily sufficient to conclude that conduct occurred, particularly when the accusing party declines to produce supporting evidence. So, simultaneously, while you were saying, we have to believe all women, over here you're saying allegations alone don't mean anything. And the only difference is the political affiliation of the accused. And I find that shocking that they are able to get away with that blatant hypocrisy in the middle of this FBI investigation. And it continues to go on. It's not an isolated incident where they make just this one exception. Joe Biden gets hit with a Me Too allegation. And when it came to Blasey Ford, you were not allowed to question any of her inconsistencies. Even the Republicans who were investigating her in Congress, they couldn't even say that she was lying. They just had to say that she was mistaken and she must have Brett Kavanaugh confused with somebody else. But here, when it comes to Tara Reade, the woman who is accusing Joe Biden of sexual misconduct, we can put in a CNN headline that she has conflicting accounts, and that just makes this really hard to understand and muddies the waters on her accusations. So again, the only difference here is the political affiliation of the accused. And I am not saying that I believe Tara Reade's story. I think most politically timed allegations, I think it's worth looking into whether or not that person has a motivation for coming forward at that particular time. And I would give anybody the benefit of the doubt. I do think it seems a little far-fetched that Joe Biden would be able to get away with sexually assaulting her in the middle of the day in the Senate hallway. I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt to both sides. I don't understand why that innocent until proven guilty standard was not held up when it came to Brett Kavanaugh, other than politics. And I think it's disgusting to use the Me Too movement and fake sexual assault allegations for politics. So we can see that they'll take advantage of women. Let's look at another group that they took advantage of and exploited around the midterms, which would have been the migrant caravan crisis that was coming towards our border just in time for the 2018 midterms. And I think it is ridiculous to say that advocating for border control is racist now that Donald Trump is saying it, because Barack Obama supported it. Barack Obama says, "We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked, and circumventing the line of people who are waiting patiently, diligently, and lawfully to become immigrants in this country." And the AP says that's true. The quote comes from a 2005 news conference where he was speaking about immigration. I've actually seen this video for myself, so I can confirm this what he says, but it's actually very hard to find that video now on the internet, so I couldn't get a copy of it, but I was able to find this news article that reported on it. So not just Barack Obama, though. I mean, Bill Clinton supported this. So we can actually watch this video about it where he sounds a whole lot like Donald Trump in his State of the Union address.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
So really, Trump's immigration policies are no different than what Barack Obama's policies were and what Bill Clinton's policies were. So it's ridiculous to now try to say that there's concentration camps on the southern border and that Donald Trump is racist for saying the same exact thing that everybody else has always said. Why wasn't it racist when the other people said it? You can not like the policy, but to immediately jump to it's racist is, where does that come from? They wanted to say that the difference between Trump's policies and the previous guy's policies were that Trump had a zero tolerance policy, that you were going to get thrown in jail if you cross the border illegally. And when you are having this migrant caravan, this flood of people that are overrunning your facilities coming across the border, that is sort of what you have to do to enforce it, to deter people from coming over. If we catch you, you're going to go to jail. And then so that led to the family separation, because obviously if you're going to have this zero tolerance policy, you're not going to throw a kid in jail. I mean, that would be worse. If you have an asylum claim, there's a legal process in which you do that. You don't just illegally cross the border and then say asylum if you get caught. There's a process that you have to go through. And so that's already a thing if it's an emergency or you're fleeing for your safety. But for this orchestrated caravan of people coming through, like, we have to check who these people are. So if you're bum rushing the border, we have to put something in place to deter you. And obviously, we're not going to put kids in jail with their parents. So you put these children in these detention facilities until you can verify if these people were even with their parents or not, if they had been kidnapped, if they were being trafficked. You have to look into all of that before you can just release the child to any random stranger that tries to claim them. And when you have this policy in place that you're not going to detain someone if they have a child with them, because you're not going to put the child in the detention facility, then you've essentially made bad guys the incentive to try to use kids as a get out of jail free card. So that is going to exploit children, because they know as long as they have a child with them, they can claim it's theirs and they don't have to actually be detained. They get released into the United States and they don't have to show back up for their court date. So here's a clip of Dan Crenshaw trying to dumb it down for the women on The View and explain to them why this policy ultimately is not good for children.
Because what they've learned over the years is that they need only to raise their hand and say they're claiming asylum, and that they need a child with them. So our laws that are based on good intentions are actually incentivizing child trafficking.
I have a child! Get up out there! Please, I have a child! Please. I'm all she has in the world.
I always think of that clip whenever I think of what the Democrats were proposing that our border policies should be. So now I want to show you this media montage that they actually showed on Tucker Carlson's show. And I like when he does these montages because they show how coordinated the media and the Democratic Party's talking points are. And it's all on the same day across all 6 major news channels, ABC, NBC, CNN, and whatever, all of them. They all say the exact same thing, cover the exact same news story, exact same language, word for word, as though they have been delivered a script. And I think that is, in actuality, it's because the news is all owned by like the same 4 people. So of course they're going to make it seem like there's a wide variety and you think it's the truth because this wide array of sources are all saying the same thing. But when you go up the pyramid, it's really just like 3 people are saying this. So if you want to know if you were watching propaganda, that is a good indicator of it. If no matter what channel you flip to, the word for word, same headline is being blasted at your face. Let's watch them talk about how this border crisis is a manufactured crisis.
You might even call the Democratic response manufactured.
All state that this is a manufactured crisis and a crisis that manufactured by the Trump administration.
This is a manufactured crisis, Bill.
How he manufactures crises like immigrants seeking legal refuge.
What the president is doing is manufacturing a crisis.
President Trump must stop holding the American people hostage, must stop manufacturing a crisis.
This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis.
Folks, the president has manufactured one heck of a political crisis for himself.
Donald Trump is manufacturing a national security crisis.
You will hear them say is that this is a manufactured crisis. It's not a national security crisis.
From Nancy Pelosi down to Debbie Wasserman Schultz or anybody else who will give him a dime for this project.
Because it's manufactured.
It's a manufactured crisis for the president to get a political win.
We have a president who will go on TV tonight and lie and lie and lie some more. This is a manufactured crisis.
So I actually think they're correct when they say it's a manufactured crisis. It's a common political tactic to accuse the other side of what you're doing. So it is a manufactured crisis. The Democrats are just the ones who manufactured it. They're the ones who benefited from it by making it a political issue around the time of the midterms. They're the ones that had their TV news crews that just so happen to know where the caravan was and to be able to follow it, to have the perfect news footage, propaganda videos to show everybody on TV. And then you can look at how they reacted when Trump actually was trying to maybe improve some of the conditions for these children down on the border. He tried to order some better beds for the kids, and he tried to order them from Wayfair, and all the Wayfair employees staged a walkout and tried to boycott Wayfair because they didn't want them to sell beds to the Trump administration. So they would rather have the kids sleep on crappier beds so they can make it a political issue and blame Donald Trump for it instead of improving the conditions for them. So it seems like they don't really care about the kids. They just want to have stuff to bash Donald Trump about at the most politically convenient time for them. The last 2 stories that we're going to talk about both take place in the incredibly corrupt Broward County, Florida, which is represented by Debbie Wasserman Schultz. At the time of the 2018 midterm elections, Florida was having a lot of controversy with the way their ballots were being counted in this one in Broward County. It's reported on here in the Sun that auditors said a little more than half of the county's voting precincts had a combined total of 885 more tabulated votes than voters. And then they tell you that that's minuscule compared to the voter turnout, and they actually had like different audits that showed different results than that, which does compromise voter confidence. And then the auditors also said that there's 18 non-citizens that are on the voter rolls. They again tried to diminish that number in perspective of everybody on the voter rolls. But then they want to tell you that they found no fraud in connection with those non-citizens. So I don't know how non-citizens on the voter rod isn't evidence of itself a fraud. I don't know an explanation for that one. That one seems pretty cut and dry to me. But what the Sun is eventually saying to you here is that a little bit of cheating is okay. Yeah, we have clear-cut evidence of cheating. There's no way that more ballots could have been turned in than there are registered people to vote. So somebody cheated. But it was just a little bit of cheating, so that's okay. I don't know why both sides... Well, I know why both sides wouldn't have a vested interest in finding that out. Because the side that cast the extra ballots don't want to find out who did that. So the only people that would be asking those questions are the side that didn't try to cheat with extra ballots. And as reported on here in the New York Times, the Democratic state of Florida's party director actually said that Rick Scott, the candidate in Florida, the Republican candidate who was running for governor, the Democratic party director compared him to a dictator for wanting this investigated, even though they do admit that some irregularities did occur. So how are you a dictator for wanting to investigate the irregularities that everyone is acknowledging have occurred? How is that a fair accusation to make of somebody that because they want fraud investigated, clear-cut fraud that everyone acknowledges, that makes them a dictator? There was also reports that extra ballots in Broward County were found in the back of rental cars and inside janitors' closets at different polling centers. And the only people that wanted that investigated were the Republican sides. The way that I look at that, it could be either side. Either the Republicans had because all of the votes that were found in these different stashes in the rental car, in the closet, all of those ballots were for the Democrat. So that's very suspicious that it's stockpiles of ballots for one person. It's either a case of that person, that candidate, having all of these ballots tucked away, ready to go in case they needed to stuff the ballot box, or it could be a case of the other side, the Republicans, taking out votes for their opponent and trying to hide them away so they wouldn't be counted. So I'm inclined to take the side of the people that want that investigated, which in this particular case was the Republican Party, because the people that did it have the interest in not asking any questions. That brings us to the last story that I want to talk about, which was the guy who lived in this van who sent mail bombs to different critics of Donald Trump and different politicians, celebrities, former intelligence chiefs. The guy that lived in this van covered with these bumper stickers mailed pipe bombs to prominent Democrats. And this story blew up in the news right at the time where there were a lot of stories that Trump supporters were getting beat up on the street for wearing their MAGA hats or voicing their support of Donald Trump. And the Democrats needed to combat that narrative that it was their supporters who were getting violent. And right at that perfect timing, we have this story of the guy in this van covered with these bumper stickers is sending mail bombs to Democrats. And we have this CNN propaganda here of a citizen who just so happened to see this van at a stoplight and took a picture of it because he was so scared by these Trump bumper stickers that this was so suspicious. It stood out to him because of the political tone. It was just too much political stuff. It seemed a little bit extreme, as though you haven't seen a person driving around with 18,000 bumper stickers about being, a vegan and loving their dog and, coexisting and all kinds of other stuff. This is the one that stuck out to you as being so extreme that you needed to tweet your concern about it right at the perfect political time where all of these allegations came out. It's very convenient. So here's the story of these pipe bombs here. It's reported on in the Miami Herald that a suspected mail bomb arrived at the district office of Florida Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. But Wasserman Schultz's package differed in this regard. It only got there because the address to which it was originally sent was incorrect. It had been sent to the office of former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, and it was delivered to the Congresswoman's office because that was listed as the return address. So this is a picture of the package. And if you'll notice up here in this corner where the stamps are, there's no cancellation stamp on those stamps. Now, in contrast, I want to show you this photo of a package. So this package is one that I took over at one of my friend's house. She mailed something to somebody and had the wrong address, and it got returned back to her. And as it was sitting there on the counter, I just happened to notice this, but it had the cancellation stamp over the packages, the one that came from the post office. You can see it right here, circled in red, says Columbus on it, because you can't reuse those stamps. As you'll see here, on this package that allegedly got to Debbie Wasserman Schultz's office because it was sent to the wrong address and got returned to sender, there's no cancellation stamp on top of these. So that package that they say here in the Miami Herald arrived at Debbie Wasserman Schultz's office because it was sent to the wrong address and got returned to her is a lie. This package never went through the postal system. This was dropped off to Debbie Wasserman Schultz's office. So they should be able to tell you who did that. They should have video footage of who the person was that dropped that off. But they lied to you and told you it came through the postal service and was returned to sender. And here's a quote from the FBI director, Christopher Wray, who says this investigation is the highest priority of the FBI and they're committing their full resources to investigating it. Yet somehow they did not notice what I was able to notice, that this package right here does not have a cancellation stamp on it. Fascinating work done by our taxpayer-funded FBI. Really on the ball. So to recap this video, we've seen that the left is willing to smear the reputations and come up with fake sexual assault allegations for political gain. And I don't know about you, but that makes me very uncomfortable that people who were involved in doing that are now in charge of this nation's law enforcement. People that will make stuff up about their political enemies are now the chief law enforcement officers in this country. Kamala Harris is one of the main people smearing Brett Kavanaugh's reputation over those Blasey Ford allegations, which she knew had no more proof than the man's high school yearbook. We learned that they would rather keep kids in crappy conditions than let them have better beds, as long as the crappy conditions make a better political argument during an election year. And I'd also like to say, by the way, with that one is now while Joe Biden's president, nothing has changed about that situation at the border, except that CNN, instead of saying kids in cages, now refers to them as migrant minors in detention overflow facilities. They've done nothing to correct that issue. So if you think they cared about that issue at the time, you got played. That was literally just for outrage in an election year. They do not care about those kids. Hate to break it to you. And then we also saw that they would stage a false flag domestic terrorist operation and pretend that they were being delivered pipe bombs through the U.S. Postal Service just to scare everybody and create a certain political narrative to deflect from their own supporters' out-of-control behavior. And then we saw that they do have a precedent for participating in voter misconduct and sketchy elections. So that's obviously going to come up and be relevant as we continue down this timeline. But these were the questions that I noticed that they ignored, and in the next video, we're going to look at a few other news stories that the media didn't ignore, but instead intentionally tried to mislead the public on. And I've said before that there is a difference between being wrong and lying. So I think it's reasonable, genuine questions to wonder what the media's motive is for lying to us as often as they do.
The press has become so dishonest that if we don't talk about it, we are doing a tremendous disservice to the American people. We have to talk about it to find out what's going on, because the press honestly is out of control. The level of dishonesty is out of control. Whatever happened to fair press? Whatever happened to honest reporting? You are fake news. Your organization's terrible.
You know, I like real news, not fake news. You're fake news.
Donald Trump rants and raves at the press. I'm not ranting and raving. I'm just telling you, you're dishonest people. But I'm not ranting and raving. I love this. I'm having a good time doing it.